more to marketing. Welcome to Modern Marketing, the podcast that explores marketing, product, and all things business. I'm your host today, Susan, and we're going to be learning all about the importance of really having those integrated marketing emails and then how this actually unfolds for omni-channel strategy as well. I am very, very fortunate today to have a special guest. It is Brandi Starr. Brandi is a true modern marketing maven. She believes marketing magic happens at the intersection of strategy, creativity, and technology. As Chief Marketing Officer at Tegrita, a marketing consultancy specialising in marketing automation and strategy for the modern marketer, Brandi helps companies of various sizes to attract, convert, close, and also retain customers using technology. Voted one of the top 50 women you need to know in Martech in 2018, and also having over 20 years career experience spanning a variety of different industries and marketing principles and disciplines, Brandi really does bring a huge amount of wealth forward for just today, but also for her clients she works with. And I'm also loving the fact that Brandi is also a co-author. She's a co-author of CMO to CRO, The Revenue Overtake by the Next Generation Executive. So that's a must read for anyone that needs to know how you can actually make money when you're in marketing and do it right, so you make things happen the right way. But I'm going to welcome you, but I'm also going to let everyone know there is a podcast that Brandi does too. We'll talk about that at the very end so you don't forget it, because we want you to also listen to her podcast too. But welcome, Brandi.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. You've done so much in your career. It's absolutely magical. And I also love, we were talking before, that we have very similar thoughts about the process of sharing knowledge and helping others on their journey.
Yeah, it is something that, I'm super passionate about. I love learning and I love sharing as well.
Tell me more about your business and how it came about.
Yeah, so I started at Tegrita 9 years ago, and the company is 10 years old. So pretty much been here, almost the entire time. And I had always worked on the client side. And I found that I had so many ideas and things that I wanted to try that weren't necessarily right for my particular organization. And so I decided to jump the fence from the client side to the consulting side, and I joined the Tegrita team. And we have since grown the business drastically. It has evolved so much, but most important, I have the opportunity to work with a lot of different organizations. And it really has helped me see like what truly works and what doesn't when you can see kind of the same things in play across multiple organizations.
Definitely. And I suppose that a lot of that is also covered in the book as well. Could you tell me a bit more about the book you helped co-author?
Yes. So it's funny, the book started as a joke. It's written by myself, the owner of our company, who is our CTO, and our CRO. And we were sitting around at Airbnb and we were talking about the challenges that we all have seen consistently throughout our careers. And we've had very different careers, different aspects of business, but we've seen the same challenges. We all had ideas of how to solve those challenges and recognized that we had seen components of it in play, but had never really seen anyone, crack that nut and do all of it. And so we were like, we should totally write a book and give our advice on how you do this right. And it was like, haha, when would we ever have time to write a book? And well, we did. And it's funny that when we started writing the book, the topic seemed very untouched. And by the time we finished writing it and it launched, the topic of, who leads revenue, what's the right role to lead revenue, what that really looks like, had become a hot topic. So the book dropped right on time because people started talking about what we had been thinking about a year before.
Absolutely perfect. And it's such a helpful resource as well. So I'll make sure that I put the link to that in the show notes too. But before we move on to our topic for today, I'd just love to know more about your accompanying podcast that you do, Revenue Rehab. Tell me more.
Yes. So Revenue Rehab, it's like therapy, but for marketers. That's our tagline. And, leading any component of revenue is a hard gig. And especially those that lead marketing, you can often feel alone, like you don't have the right network, the right resources. You know, there's so much information. It's figuring out where to pay attention. And on top of it being a hard gig, it is also like we're all human. And there are leadership challenges. You know, I always say like the managing people is way harder than, you know, managing the work. You know, most executives are over 40, some headed towards retirement. There's challenges that come along with that. And so, you know, I'm a big advocate of therapy, you know, for everyone all of the time. But in thinking about it, it's like these are conversations that we should have. And I didn't want to just talk about the marketing practice. Or the revenue, you know, the revenue, the practice of doing these things. I really wanted to tackle the whole human. And so that's what we do. We talk primarily about challenges faced by revenue, but then we cover some personal stuff. We've covered executive burnout. We've covered caring for aging parents. Some of the challenges of, you know, when you inherit a team that's not that great, when you take a new role. And so really thinking about all of the challenges and bringing people, you know, to the virtual couch to really work through those things and offer advice for people who may be struggling with that.
I think that's such a strong message as well to share with everyone, because in my career, I don't think many people have actually spoken about what's happened. How could we do better? Has anyone been through this? Can anyone give me advice? So it's a fantastic way that you can listen in and not feel like you're potentially being judged as well. If it's actually happening to you, you can hear other people's journeys and learn from them and process from it as well. So I love that thought. And I'd love to see even more of your podcasts coming out and how they touch other regions as well, because there's just so much there that people can talk to, particularly with the changing in marketing itself and how that then impacts revenue, to impact the team, to impact, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And that is exactly the mission.
Wonderful. Well, today we're actually going to be talking about Brandi's fabulous passion. So Brandi does have a passion. We had a chat offline, and it's all about the email marketing and how you actually bring that together as part of a true omni-channel strategy, which many businesses still struggle to do, even though we've been in digital for quite a while now. So I'm going to go straight into basics.
Okay.
Why are emails important? What role does email marketing currently play in an overall marketing strategy? And how does it contribute to that omni-channel approach?
I am a strong believer that email sits at the center of all of the marketing that we do. And our strategy needs to be built around email. And I know that in some circles can be a controversial opinion, but when you think about it, like, so thinking about those top of funnel things that people do, we've got organic and paid search, organic and paid social, programmatic ads, content syndication, all these different things that we do to attract people to us, to get people paying attention to what our message is. Once we've accomplished that, there's a factor of, and then what? And so it's not like someone downloads a white paper and magically wants to buy something from you. Like, that just is not the way that it works. And so it is about, how do we create the right communications to send to those people that are going to move them through whatever journey they need to go through. And that's not always a buyer's journey. Like, not everyone is in market. Like, there's a lot of statistics that say only 5% of your addressable audience is in market at any one time. And so some cases, the journey is an education journey. And so, you know, and then as they progress through the process of being ready to potentially engage with sales, there is a component of email there as well, whether it's marketing email, or even you think about what the salespeople are sending. If it's tech, they do a demo. What's being sent after that? And so, you know, and then even through to, you have a new customer, they've said yes, signed on the dotted line. How are we communicating with them so that they continue to feel like that purchase was a good one? And then how do we keep them engaged and using our product and service? And if there's a renewal component, renewing or cross-sell, upsell, like email is one of the few channels. And honestly, I'd say other than your website, it's really the only channel that is used at every single stage of the journey. So prospect, customer, etc.
Very true. And I think a lot of the time, companies don't actually address that they are different segment and time periods as well. They treat them all the same. They treat everyone identical. They don't actually look at what some of the data is saying to them along the journey, such as their research phase, or they're a gifter, or it's for themselves. And for me, a lot of the emails and making it more strategic, it's about using data the right way to do the right message to help them 100% on that journey of discovery and when they're ready. But I do love how you talk through about the after the purchase, because there's many products and services out there that you're right. You have to have follow-ups. You have to have check-ins. There might be a regular service every year that has to happen with it too, or just to make sure it's functioning correctly. Or, hey, someone may have bought something very expensive, say, I don't know, a KitchenAid. It would be very handy to be able to continually just send out recipes or the latest function so that they're continually engaged along the way.
Yeah. And, I think like the examples that you used are more B2C, and that's where I see more companies getting it right. Because you think about, there is a direct tie to the revenue in business to consumer brands, because the email goes out, someone clicks it, there's some revenue that happens directly tied to that. We work a lot in the B2B space, and that's where it gets a bit more muddy, because there isn't always that direct correlation of we sent these emails out and they bought something. If I'm, an organization and I'm spending $50,000, I'm not doing that in like, oh, let me click this button and put in my credit card for 50 grand. Like, that's not how business works. And so I think getting email right is much harder for B2B organizations, but it's so much more important because, let's say you miss out on the KitchenAid sale, but that's not as huge in missing one person, buying a KitchenAid that's, $500, $600, $700 versus missing out on a $50,000 or $100,000 opportunity for B2B organizations.
100%. And I keep thinking to myself, because currently I work with a lot of loyalty platforms and marketing and CRM platforms. So I can see how they come to me, they do a demo. What's their next strategy after that for when I can put them in front of potentially a client to be part of the tender, for example. I feel that that's 100%. I agree with you that there's probably a lot of opportunity there that's not being looked into about how do I keep in touch with these key people that could help me land a sale in the future that is, like you said, $50,000, $250,000, $500,000 to be able to get that in a tech platform as well.
Yeah. And I do think that, you hit on a use case that is so often overlooked, and that is the partner community, because in many cases that it is a partner or a consultant or an agency that is the main influencer, and they're an influencer for multiple customers, but so many brands aren't thinking about that. And, email is the perfect channel to leverage to stay in front of those people.
I also love email in the sense that I love to archive things and go back to it so that I've always got a source. So instead of having to try and remember that conversation or that demo, afterwards, I'm hoping that they send me through either the recording of the demo or the deck. So then I can file that as well so that I can refer to it whenever I need to as well. And that's another thing that I love in the B2B space, is having that ability with the emails as well, because conversations can get forgotten, muddied up in your head, all of those things. But when you've actually got it there, it's almost like it's tangible, that you can just go back to it and actually feel and remember that presentation again.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that a lot of times people think about the email impacting the brand only when they click. But that's not the case. To your point, quite often people will read an email and archive it and, intend to come back to it later. It's not something they need to address. And in some cases, just seeing the brand's name pop up in their inbox can also be a trigger of like, oh yeah, I need to go back. And so some people won't even open the email. They'll just then go open your website and it'll show up more as those direct visitors that came direct to your site because that email was just a trigger of a memory of something that they needed to look into.
Definitely. I think I'd love to get onto our next question here because I think it's a really interesting one. What are some of those key benefits for those for all those emails, the marketing emails and everything, and really integrating them into omni-channel strategies, both for customer engagement perspectives and also for, I suppose, in the terms of driving sales? What are some of those key benefits?
There's two key benefits. So number one is going to be that email is going to make every other channel better. And I'll give you an example in just a second. Number two is that email will help to inform your strategy. And so it kind of is, back and forth. So email helps make every other channel better because again, you think about how much, and I'll just use programmatic ads. So many companies spend, tons and tons and tons of money on programmatic every year. Like I know small companies even spend 10 grand a month on programmatic. And so there's a lot of spend there. And a lot of times the effectiveness of that spend is measured on how many people did we get to take the call to action. And that call to action is great, but unless that call to action is revenue, then there's still a gap. And so this is where when we then can follow that up with email and stay engaged and nurture those people to get them to the point where they're ready to do something. Because on the net new side, it is ready to make a purchase. But even on the customer side, it could be just staying engaged with them so that they do renew later or that, they take some other action. And so every other channel, whether it's events, programmatic, social, search, all the different channels are all made more effective when email is connected to them. And then the other piece is by tapping into email data and, and relating it to those other channels, you can start to see what's really working. And so the best example I have of that is I had a client that worked with multiple content syndication vendors, and they were planning to, reduce the number and just keep two of them. And they believed that, this particular vendor was like their number one top choice. They were getting tons of leads from this vendor. Their cost per lead was low. And so they were like, this is one we're definitely keeping. They asked for some input to help pick a second. Well, what I ended up finding when I started looking at how contacts connect and, how they were engaging after they came in from the content syndication vendors, one of the vendors that they were for sure planning to cut because they produced the fewest number of contacts and they also were the highest cost per lead, they were the ones that actually sent over contacts that stayed engaged. So although it cost more per contact and they got fewer, those people continued to engage long after they came into their system. And so they were able to see that email engagement. Whereas the one that was generating tons of leads at a lower cost, those people did almost nothing. And so that basically was wasted money in buying names that were never going to buy from you. And so, the analysis of looking at the email data completely informed their strategy on how they tackled content syndication, which was their number one channel for driving net new contacts.
I think there's also so much that's just put on also on last click. That last click is king. We're really attributing models are so much more powerful. Like in your example, if I even delve in and change it a little bit, it could also have been the example of if they use last click. This one is giving us all the click-throughs, they're giving us all the leads, But if you do the attributing model, you actually find out the other company they're about to cut off was the one people were researching first, but happened to land on the other company last. So
Yeah.
the power of data and being able to actually mine it and bring it back to what does engagement look like? What does sales actually look like? What does your lifelong customer value look like as well? Adding those into can be very powerful.
I agree completely.
What other measures have you found really effective when you've been doing all of these different types of campaigns with different clients? What metrics do you think people should prioritize? So you're giving a great example there, but I'm sure there's many other ones that people should consider too that you have seen work really well.
Yeah, for me, it is really looking at things in aggregate. So engagement, where you are able to measure, and sort of break down audiences and look at the data in batches. So for some companies, industry is really big. Mm-hmm. And so we'll take campaign data, from email campaigns or other tactics and look at it isolated by industry. Because what we've seen is for some audiences, and it doesn't have to be industry, in some cases it's by persona, in some cases it's geo, especially for global companies. But for whatever the thing is, we will look at it that way, because in some cases we've seen initiatives be really effective in a particular industry or a particular geo or for a particular persona where it is completely flopping for another. And so in some cases, we're going to keep doing what we're doing related to this group, but we're going to come up with a new plan or a modified plan when it comes to this other group. And so, I have people all the time ask, if I've got any special metrics that I'm using. And for different clients, there are some unique metrics that we've come up with, but they are always more specific to what they do. Mm-hmm. But universally, the big thing is really segmentation and not just looking at how things are performing across the board, but looking at those subsegments to understand, is this working? Is this moving the needle? And also looking at what the impact is, because just thinking about it from a sales perspective, in some cases, the marketing tactics are helping to generate revenue. In some cases, it's velocity. So, the revenue is there. You're not getting any new revenue from your efforts, but you help that revenue, come in faster. Or on the other side, retention, like the marketing efforts are so that you don't have churn and you aren't, losing those people. And so it's less about, finding the unique metrics and more about how do we get more insight from the basics first? Yep. And then once you've really mastered that, that's where there's some other opportunity to then look at, are there other metrics that we want?
And I think that's so important because a lot of the companies I've seen or you read about, or even you may have heard from friends, they try and get a bit too fancy and creative with some of their reporting. and it's almost like they're trying to make the story fit what they want and not actually show what it truly is. And 100%, you need to get back to basics, put it against also your KPIs to ensure, and then explore to see what insights you can get out of it. And that's actually what I do with my team. I'm always straight away going, okay, what is this telling me? That's great. You can tell me there's 4,000 transactions, but that's meaningless without, has it gone up? Has it gone down? What's made this move? We need those insights to go with it. So that's actually going to be able to help someone make a decision if there needs to be one.
Yes. And that's exactly it, is really start with the basics, put some context around it, let the data tell whatever story the data tell, because, sometimes people do try to make the data tell a good story, but there's lessons in something sucking. We just had an email program that I thought was amazing. And the assets, I had some of our target audience, so CMOs that I knew, test out the asset to get some feedback. And they were like, oh, this is amazing. It's extremely helpful. I'm going to send it to my team. And so I knew that was good. But when I looked at the performance of the campaign, it kind of flopped. And that happens. Like, it doesn't mean the campaign was bad. It doesn't mean, we were bad marketers or we failed. It just means it didn't work in that context. And so we looked at what was working, where people were dropping off, and we made a change. And we had a couple iterations of making a change, and then we found where we started to see traction. And so, that is important, especially with email or any of your channels. Don't try to make up a story. Just let the data tell what story, is what's actually happening. Let it tell the truth, and you pivot from there, because there's lots that can be learned. And this is where I say email helps to inform the rest of your strategy, is we take away from those lessons and we can say, okay, how do we do better in this? In our case, the situation was our targeting on our programmatic ads was a bit off. And once we figured out how to better target, people responded to the email campaign and the asset. And so it's like, I could have thought like, oh, our email program is bad, when that wasn't the case. You got to look at everything in context.
Exactly. And I think so many people also can sometimes jump at shadows and not even think that, okay, we've just got to make a pivot here, or a small increase in budget or decrease in budget, whatever it could be, or maybe change the comms a little bit here. They just start jumping and going, oh, we've got to, and some examples I've seen, increase the discount or give away more. They don't actually give it a chance to pivot and try in those different industries, areas, all those different avenues that you could test before you actually go, you know what, this does suck. We need to move on.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Do you have any other examples of campaigns that you're able to share, either unsuccessful or successful?
Yes, of course. There's always lots of them. I'll start with unsuccessful. And honestly, most unsuccessful campaigns I see have one consistent thing in common, and that is generic targeting.
Like I was saying before.
Yes. And I mean, I could probably rattle off 10 different examples of client campaigns that have not gone well that were related to targeting. And so, that's kind of the bottom line. But I'll give you another example of a really good campaign, and one that pulls in the multiple channels together. And so had a client where they had developed this big white paper. It was like very meaty, very thought leadership focused, like it was a big deal. They, anchored a lot of things on this. And so they ran multiple top of funnel channels. So they did some programmatic, some organic social. They had, which I guess now would be called an influencer, wasn't then, but they had a third party that was helping to promote it. So multiple things running to get people to download this white paper. So single call to action. And then once they downloaded the white paper, there was a nurture campaign, so email nurture, that was not focused on driving a sale, because someone who downloads a white paper is not raising their hand to say, I want to buy something. But what it did was really pick apart this white paper. And I mean, I think this white paper was probably 12, 15 pages. Like this was like a meaty thing.
Lots of content in there.
Yes. And so the nurture really broke down into small pieces some of the key points from the white paper and the key considerations. So like, here's a point. Here's what you need to be thinking about related to that point. And if you want to dig into this, go to page 8 or, whatever. So it referred back to, if this is a thing for you, go back to the white paper that you already got. And they put a link in there just in case, someone couldn't find it. So you could always get back to it again. And that time it was ungated. And it was one of those things that the repeat visits to the white paper, you could tell people were engaged. And it was because they very much focused on not what are we selling, and then At the bottom of every email, there was some other content that tied to their product. So if someone was interested, they're putting it in front of them. But the focus of the email, so probably 70% of the email was, the content was in the email. So there wasn't a real CTA. It was just, this is what the point is. Here's what you need to think about. Oh, and if you need the white paper again, click it. Or here's this other stuff if you want some help with, this sort of thing. And the engagement on that email was so high, or on all the emails on the campaign was so high, because it kept giving people something to think about. And they kept going back to that white paper. And so the goal of it really was to drive that engagement and to, position the business as a trusted source, a thought leader, et cetera. And then a certain level of engagement fed them into another campaign that was more nurturing around what they offer. So it's like, if you keep engaging with these emails, chances are you do really have this problem. And so now we're going to start to talk to you a little bit different. And so that is one example of something that worked really, really well, because it was a very specific audience, only the people who had downloaded the white paper. It didn't focus on the sales. It focused on what that person needed after taking that action, gave them enough that they could engage, that could be an indicator that they'd be interested. And so by the time, a sales rep, because they did have BDRs, that those people that went into that second nurture also went to a BDR. And so at least by that point, they know who the company is. They know they've been engaging with these emails. It's not so off-putting that someone's reaching out to you trying to get a meeting, as opposed to what happens in most places. You download a white paper and 30 seconds later, a sales rep is calling you talking about you want to schedule a demo. And it's like, I haven't even opened the white paper yet, but that's my rant.
That's so true. Or they start stalking you on LinkedIn.
Yes, that too.
No, I think that's an absolutely fabulous example, particularly of moving them into a different funnel stream where it's now turned into a warm lead. From being the cold one, over time it's built up and become warm, so that even if they're not interested yet, or it's not the right time, they now can build a relationship with that salesperson.
Yes.
And they're not going to be so off-putting.
And that's the goal.
I love this. Are there any other insights or lessons from your past campaigns that you bring about and actually utilize quite a bit in your toolkit?
Yes. The one thing is actually not a part of the campaigns, but it is what I call a campaign map. And I do this work with clients. It's always fun coming up with it. We've got one internally for Tegrita. I work with clients on it, and it is really creating this grid that identifies what are all the email programs that should exist. And what purpose do they serve? When should people go into them? And like mapping out the full thing of, in an ideal state, what would this look like? And then from there, that is where we put a plan in place of like, where do we start? So based on what's currently running, what the business objectives are, where they may be struggling, it may make sense to start in different places for different companies. But then over time, it's just like, okay, we're going to knock these two out at the same time. When we get those done, we go back and identify what's the next thing on the campaign map. And what we end up doing with that is building out an infrastructure on the back end that controls who goes into which campaign. So instead of just, here's this audience, we're going to push them into this thing, we're doing it really smart and really programmatic in like, this, based on what you've done, based on who you are, based on what we have to say, this is the next right set of communications for you. And going through that process of thinking about what are the different types of communications that should exist. What does that map look like? How is it different for prospects versus customers, or in some cases, personas or industries or geos, and like actually fleshing out a real plan That is my secret sauce to how do we get effective with email? Because then we start thinking about it differently. Because for most people, email is an afterthought. They're running something, they do this white paper, they start generating all this. And I literally had this happen about a month ago. A client goes, "Hey, we've got this industry report out there. We've got about 5,000 people that have downloaded it. We just thought about it. We should probably say something else to them." And I'm like,
really?
but they downloaded it a month ago. Like, even if I created something for you today, do they even remember that they downloaded it a month ago? Like, it just, it can't be an afterthought. It has to be like at the time that you're planning the white paper, there should be a conversation of, okay, here's how we're promoting the white paper. And then and then what?
Exactly. And like we were talking about before, it shouldn't always be the same generic comms as well. You need to think about that segmentation, and do they have to be slightly different, or do they have to have some more dynamic content from the white paper within there to make it more interesting as well, so that it is the right content at the right time. Otherwise, you're going to lose them as well.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the scariest things I find talking to many businesses. They don't want to change or do things differently in case of the unsubs. You've come across this as well?
Yes, the audible sigh. Unsubscribes are good. And if people don't want to hear from you, they don't want to hear from you. Like, someone who would unsubscribe is someone that's not going to buy from you anyway.
They're not interested.
Yes, you think about it. The average person, other than the occasional, I'm so sick of my inbox being full, I'm unsubscribing from everything. Like, I think we do have some rage unsubscribes that happen. But beyond that, most people don't unsubscribe because FOMO, fear of missing out, is very real.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times people don't want to unsubscribe because it's like, well, what if they send that thing I might actually want? So I'm just going to stay on the list. So if someone gets to the point where they are like, I don't want to be on this list, they have already decided that they have zero interest in what you sell. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. Like, everybody, it's like that movie, he's just not that into you. I'm like, everybody isn't meant to buy from you. Get those people off your list and focus on talking to the people who care.
And I think the other layer to that is sometimes they may have already done the purchase and they never ever need to engage again because of whatever the product or service is that you do. Sometimes that is actually a natural part of some different kind of company structures with their product, that they don't have repeat purchases. They don't have the opportunity for upsell or resell or anything like that. It literally is, this is it, goodbye. So that needs to be recognized as well, of what type of business you are and what your nurture campaigns are, to be able to go, does it make sense?
Yeah. And a great B2C example, I had a friend, we were laughing because she doesn't drink alcohol. However, she bought something for Father's Day or for her husband or her dad last year that was like this custom, like, whiskey making thing that you can, make your own whiskey. And of course, now she's on their list and she's like, this isn't my jam. And so she unsubscribed. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. If she ever was in a scenario again that she needed that kind of thing, she'd probably come back and buy from you. But she doesn't want your emails day in and day out on, the best whiskeys or how to make craft cocktails with whiskey or whatever. Like, she doesn't drink. And so, like, that's a really simple example of why the unsubscribes are okay. There's different reasons and it's fine.
And I actually have an example very recently. So I was just helping out this other company, just giving some advice because of part of my background. And I said to them, your company is very one particular type of sex skewed. So it was men skewed. But naturally on your database, you're going to have a lot of females. maybe you actually need to look at how you segment your database for the communication you do, because I'm sure that woman isn't going to want to see beard oil every week in the emails. She's the gifter. So therefore you need to treat her as the gifter or the main purchaser, whatever she identifies herself with. I think you need to put an identification strategy in when you're capturing these emails so you know what type of comms. Because again, I don't know how often men need to buy beard oil. I don't know how long those tubes, the tubs last for, but I'm sure she's only buying it once a year for like Father's Day or a birthday or something as well. So she doesn't need that weekly reminder.
Yeah, it is, and that goes back to like, how do you want to communicate to your audience? You have to capture that information because it may be, like capturing gender sometimes can be sensitive, but you could always just ask, are you buying for yourself or someone else?
Exactly.
Like,
and then
doesn't matter the gender. I mean, because you think about it, even a man buying beard oil, if I'm a man, I'm buying beard oil for my father, but I have a clean shaven face. Yep. Yes, I am a man, but your beard oil can't help me.
Exactly.
And so that is where, sometimes it is about asking the right questions or gathering the right information, because you want to get what matters for you to segment. And so some people would default to, oh, I need to capture gender. And it's like, no, you don't actually need to capture gender. Especially, we are in like people identify differently and being, sensitive to these things. It's like, it's not necessary to ask for gender.
Exactly.
But ask, are you going to use this? Like, if it's for beard oil, do you have a beard or are you buying for someone with a beard? Doesn't matter your gender. I could be a woman with a beard. Doesn't matter. Is it for me or somebody else? And so, yeah, it is gathering the right information so that you can talk to people in a meaningful way is a key part of all types of marketing, but especially email.
And again, come down to that unsub. It will help reduce that as well if you have that strategy in place, because you shouldn't have the fear to ask the right questions up front, because it will have a great impact further along, where in this case, when they do put through those questions, they'll have less people dropping off because of the relevant email content. And hopefully they will see, as part of the metrics, as you said, sometimes the email is just a trigger to automatically just type in the email address. They should then see a pickup there as a correlation.
Yes, that is my sentiment exactly.
Wonderful. I know you love this space, but what excites you the most about marketing emails?
The possibilities. It is so, because email is a low cost channel, because you have the technology and it doesn't carry the same price tag like many of the other channels. The possibilities are endless. And so there's lots of opportunity to experiment. There's lots of opportunity to test, to try new things. Especially with like audiences that are engaged, like that's the place to like try something different. And so like you don't have that with other channels. Like, we do testing on, we recommend testing for everything, but you think about even when you're testing ads, there's a cost to that. So you kind of got to figure it out quickly. With email, you could be testing all year long. Every email could be a test of some sort. I mean, that would be overwhelming, but it could be. And so that's what gets me really excited, is the influence that I know that email has and the possibilities. And it's like there's so many things you could do to make everything in the business better when starting with email. And so that's why I get jazzed about it.
No, I feel it, and I can see it as well in your big smile that you've got on it, because I completely agree with you that email is so important and sometimes is so underutilized, particularly even basic data, you can do magic with it. So I love your enthusiasm on emails, and we're a kindred spirit here. I'm loving it.
I love it. I love it.
Well, I have a final question for you. I ask all of my guests. What brand, any brand in the world, best represents you and why?
This is a tough one because there are so many brands that I align to, but thinking about what speaks to me most, it is a small company called Passion Footwear. And what Passion Footwear is, for those that are not familiar, it is high heels where the sole can be swapped out. So you can have the shoe and it can be a 3-inch heel, and then your feet start hurting and you pop that sucker off and it can be a flat. Or it could be a wedge. And the reason that I really identify with that brand is, first off, they're a fun company. Just if they were started by a 23-year-old college student. They're fun, they're innovative, they solve a problem. I'm very much a problem solver. And the two other things that I really love about that brand that I identify with is, in their mission, they talk about how women always have to choose. Like, you have to, like, you think about with shoes, it's like, am I going to be cute or am I going to be comfortable? Do I want, career or family? Like, there is always this choice, and they have the belief that, women can do it all. And I am kind of that person. Like, people are always asking me, like, how do you do it all? Like, how do you do so much? And then they are also a high end but practical brand. So they're expensive. I mean, not like designer expensive, but they're not cheap. But they're also practical, because it's like one pair of shoes. Yeah, you buy 3-4 different heels and you got all these different shoes in one. And so that really, I'm fun, I'm upbeat, I try to be innovative. I'm a problem solver. I do a lot, I believe I can do all the things, and I am both high end and practical. So
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I haven't heard of the name, but I've heard of the shoe. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know that was the brand with the shoe, but I actually have seen I think like YouTube videos and other videos over the years of it. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and they are so cute.
Yeah, check them out. Like, I mean, I have no affiliation to them, but I definitely believe in the brand.
I love it. And I love how you've connected it to yourself as well. I think that's absolutely spot on. And I just can't wait to see pictures of you with these different shoes. I'm just going to do a quick roundup for everyone as well, which I love to do. So this particular podcast is all about the power of email and how you can bring it into your business and actually make magic happen with it. So email should really be treated as central to what you're doing with all your communication strategies, because it really can glue it all together and continue that journey and nurture that journey beyond just the first touch point. It has so much power if you actually bring in the data and marry that with everything else. It really is that central glue. Now, there's no right or wrong way to do emails. Test and learn along the way, do different integrations that work, and make sure you're actually looking at your data and segmenting. So that could be on personas, geos, industry, but it also could be on other metrics that make more sense for your company. Make sure you're thinking about it more from what your company does when they're talking. What happens in that journey that should continue past just the first email? What does the salesperson do when they do a demo? Do they actually send out all the details from that demo? And then what can you nurture beyond that you have naturally that will help nurture a continuing conversation that's engaging? Think about what marketing's doing as well. How can it be supported, and in what ways can you build out your campaign map to make it make more sense? B2B, B2C, they are a bit different, but you can also look at other means of people that are coming through, talking to you via email and connecting with you, like partners. There's a partner community out there and they've got high influence value. So make sure you're capturing those as well and treating them with the respect that they should get, but also the engagement they need to be able to help with decision making and hopefully bring you up to the forefront and top of mind. Follow-up and engagement is huge, particularly if you've got a product or service that has renewals, upsell or cross-sell, because you don't want to miss out on those opportunities. And email is one of the cheaper channels. So not only is it that glue, it can also help you in the long run as well with the costs that you may have for your marketing budgets too. The key benefits, as Brandi has shared with us. So number one is email makes every other channel better. because, as I'm calling it, the glue, it just connects it all together. It's an area where you can just funnel all that different content you're getting and nurture and make those campaigns out of there for the future with relevant info at the right time. And two, email helps to inform your strategy. It helps you with what's working, what the data is, and data is ultimately key for any type of campaign and strategy, even for businesses. Now, metrics, don't get too fancy with them. Keep it simple. If you need unique ones, bring unique ones in, but make sure you get the basics right, particularly about your segmentation and understanding how your subsections work, how they work, and what the impact is. And if there's any other opportunities that come out of it from the insights that you build from there, then you can get a bit more fancy. But always remember context, because you don't want to go a bit too, I want to fill in the story, I want it to make it right. Use the data with integrity, because that's how you make sensible business decisions. When it comes to getting that data, sometimes it might not look too good. But guess what? You can do this magical thing called pivot. And that's where test and learns come in. This is where you may go to a different industry, maybe change your comms a bit. But look at it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the business to improve, and you're learning from it as well. And that's how you can look for your traction and bring it about to be something more magical. Unsuccessful campaigns generally come about because you haven't listened to the data, and you also haven't looked into how you could make it more dynamic for those users. So try and steer away from a generic as much as possible where it makes sense, because that's where you bore people and you get those unsubscribes. But we do not fear unsubscribes, because, as we were talking about before, if someone unsubscribes from your newsletter, it's for a reason. It's usually a very good, valid reason. They don't need the product and service. They actually are not interested. They are not engaged. You want an engaged base. So by having those people leave, it's actually more positive for who you have on your base, because that means they are actually wanting to hear what you're saying. And most people will stay on because of the fear of missing out. FOMO is real. So make sure you have, if you're going to do a nurture campaign, you continue giving those excellent little golden nuggets along the way, so they do have that fear of missing out, particularly if it's more of a nurture campaign. And I do love the example that Brandi gave of that, where you might use a white paper, for example, and then you do a nurture campaign out of that, where every follow-up email is more about 70% on the learning. Hey, this is something you might want to consider. Here's the white paper to read it on this page. And then a little bit at the bottom about, hey, these are our services. If you need help, we're here. But using the data from people clicking through to then create another email funnel of warm leads. That's how you can get better engagement. And that's how you'll be able to be more successful with your email campaigns and bring it together as the glue. I really love the idea of the campaign map, where you grid out the purposes of all your emails, when people should be moving into different email streams, and the ideal state you want to do. Start off with, where do you start? What's the basic? And then build from there, and look at what your objectives are, and also where you're struggling, because they're areas you probably should start ticking off first. Use the whole Pareto rule, 80-20, and then start working through there. But behavior will tell you a lot of that. And that's why, again, data is key. Lastly, I just want to end on nurture. Emails are a form of nurture. They are the glue. They how everything comes together. And Brandi's done a great job in doing that and sharing that with us today about how you can do it in your business and how you can continue it, so that you've got those ongoing conversations in such a positive way with your base. How did I go, Brandi?
Great. I am impressed that you were able to recap that much so quickly.
I do love all my guests, and I love to learn, as we've talked about before. So I think there's just so many insights about emails that you've uncovered here for us all. So we'll be able to have a lot of takeaways here to be able to bring into our own businesses and make them flourish even better.
Well, I have enjoyed.
Thank you so much, Brandi. And everyone, don't forget to check out her podcast, Revenue Rehab is on all good platforms. So make sure you look up that. It's perfect for chief marketing officers, chief revenue officers. It is transparent. She is entertaining as hell. There are hundreds of conversations there to develop a collective solution, but also heaps of takeaways for those bigger challenges faced by your revenue team, not just work, but also the personal ones that creep in too. I will add that link to the show notes. Don't forget the book as well, I already mentioned. That will be in the show notes too. Anything else to add, Brandi?
No, again, thank you so much for having me. I have truly enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you so much. So have I. Thanks for everyone tuning in to Modern Marketing. Don't forget to subscribe for more insights, fabulous guests. Add any comments you like along the way, and I'll talk to you next time. More to marketing.